Joining me on this episode of the Work in Progress podcast are Brian Peckrill, Executive Director of the William G. McGowan Charitable Fund, and a frequent guest, Johnny C. Taylor, President and CEO of SHRM. Welcome to the both of you.
Yeah, thank you. Great to speak with you again.
Thank you, Ramona. It's a pleasure to be here.
The two groups came together to present the third annual Ethical Leader of the Year Award to Marvin Ellison, the Chairman of CEO of Lowe. And I want to take this opportunity to talk about what is the foundation of the award and also why Marvin Ellison. So let's start first. Maybe, Brian, you can tell me a little bit about what's behind the award.
Absolutely. This is the third year that we've presented the Ethical Leader of the Year Award, all in partnership with the Society for Human Resource Management, of course. For the past 15 years, the McGowan Fund has focused on nurturing the next generation of business leaders through our Fellows Program. The Fellows Program started in 2008 when we looked at the Great Recession and the role that some unethical leadership played in that. And we thought that we could help uplift leaders through our Fellows Program. After about 13, 14 years, we realized that our Fellows Program was phenomenal, but there's great leaders out there in the world who are making business decisions that have both great financial impact, but are also mindful of their stakeholders, their customers, as well as their workforces. And we thought that this was a fantastic moment that we could, in partnership with SHRM, play who these individuals are and how they're transforming not just their organizations, but society. And really, that's how the Ethical Leader of the Year Award was born.
And Johnny, how about SHRM? Why did you decide to partner on this?
To the credit of Brian and the folks of the McGowan Fund, they realized that, sure, organizations can struggle when they have poor ethical behavior at the top, but more often than not, it's not the behavior of the CEO, him or herself. It's people down into the organization. And it's because the culture is not one that makes clear that ethics is the way we do business, is table stakes. And so when they came to us, and it was I remember the first call to discuss this possible joint partnership, I was like, yeah, it's not enough to just select ethical CEOs. You've got to make sure that we frame this up and cascade this culture of ethical behavior down into the organization. And we would be the perfect partner for that, given that we have 340,000 members and 180 plus countries, and ultimately impacting and working with about 160 million workers and their families around the globe. So it was a marriage made in heaven. And it was so smart, I think, of both organizations to realize that this is, when you think about ethical cultures, it is both a treetop and a sort of ground up grassroots effort to get this right. We need every employee and we need all leaders, and we do this right, then we have cultures, business cultures that are successful and ethical.
What is a good definition, more specifically, of what you're looking at when you look at ethical behavior in a company, in a culture?
Brian, go at that, because I love how you all define it. And I think you've spent a lot of time thinking about it, thus the creation of this award. So let's talk about it.
I believe that naturally all leadership is values-based. And at the McGowan Fund, we've spent a lot of time thinking about what are the values that we believe put forth ethical leadership. And we've come to the conclusion that there's 6 core competencies: character and integrity, accountability, empathy, self-awareness, resilience, and courage. And leaders need all of these. And sometimes they need different qualities at different moments. But to really put forth a leadership practice that doesn't just benefit the financial performance of the organization, but pushes the organization forward and serves its people, individuals need all of these values. So when we're thinking about who might make a good candidate, who might make a good winner, we're looking at these individuals, the decisions that they've made that have affected people, that have also affected its financial performance. And by virtue, is it courageous? Are they self-aware of how they're showing up in this world? Are they accountable to those that they serve? Are they backing up their words with actions? So we've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and this is a framework that the McGowan Fund puts forth both in our fellows program as well as in our criteria for the Ethical Leader of the Year award.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that when you talk about ethics, you've heard I remember growing up, it's what you do when no one's watching. No one's there to keep you accountable. You have your own compass, your own moral compass that says, I shouldn't do this because I shouldn't do it, not out of fear that I might be caught. And Brian, you're right. There are these principles and guiding principles, characteristics. But ultimately, when we talk in organizations as SHRM, we say we're oftentimes, every employee, from the CEO down to the entry-level employee, has the opportunity to, or is confronted with those moments where they can go left or right. And where there's a very, very clear legal answer, but sometimes the ethical answer one can skirt. And so we need to help people say, what do you do when you are at that crossroads? And an organization has to build that capacity, has to build that normative behavior, by the way, and expectation in just making the decision when you ultimately get to make the decision. I'm reminded, I won't name a particular organization, but we've seen these where, again, a manager at a banking location just gets to decide whether I'm going to put someone into a product that's good for me because it helps me get a better bonus, but may not be good for this 70-year-old woman who's going to need this investment to perform for her retirement. There's not a legal answer generally, but there's a right and a wrong. And the ethical decision is one that we've got to make sure that we teach our colleagues how to recognize when you are facing an ethical dilemma or choice, and then how to make the right choice under those circumstances. That's what it's about to us.
So how do you get that ingrained into the culture?
You start with making it a part of your culture very intentionally. You can't just assume that we all have the same moral compass sense of right or wrong. You've actually got to tell people these are our guiding principles. This is the way you will operate here. That doesn't take away the room for diversity of perspective, but it means that these are the guardrails and you must operate within these guardrails. So when you talk about practically how do you do it, it starts with articulating, building, showing people, describing the behaviors that we find acceptable and not acceptable. And then the next step, once you've done that and articulated it, you've now got to be intentional about cascading it. It's training, it's reminding people, it's putting people in scenarios where they actually are forced to say, what would I do, before they're actually confronted with actually having to live that situation, right? So that's it. It takes a lot more training. We talk about how do you prevent sexual harassment, for example, in the workplace? You train people, you tell them what behavior is acceptable and what's not acceptable, and then you give them examples of it. This requires the same level of intentionality to create culturally acceptable behaviors, because we're constantly, businesses are living organisms. People come in and they leave and they come in. So just when you thought, here are my 10,000 employees and they all get it, the next day, 100 of those people are brand new somewhere in the enterprise. And so you've got to constantly reinforce it. Brian, what do you think?
I agree completely with everything you said. It really starts at that beginning point of defining what your values are and how you articulate that to your community. Whether it's our organization here at the McGowan Fund or our fellows program, we're so intentional when we onboard people, going over what our values are, how do those show up, what our behavioral principles are. And when we're training MBA students, we spend a lot of time in simulations and experiential learning, focused on what does it look like when it comes time to live your values. The piece I always talk to my MBA students about is they've spent 2 years focused on how to maximize profit. They can do it so well. They have all the tools, all the equations to show how they can maximize profit. I want them to understand how their values reflect within this. They're going to have to make really difficult decisions. They might have to be part of a downsizing, and that's business. But I want them to understand when it comes to their self-awareness, their accountability, their empathy for others, the challenges that go into it and how these decisions affect others. And I believe it all begins with establishing what your principles are, creating behavioral anchors that looks like, and then creating simulations and opportunities for individuals to flex and practice those behaviors laden with those principles.
Is part of this ethical leadership idea consequences for bad behavior?
That's a fantastic question, Ramona. I think that at the fund, and certainly with the Ethical Leader of the Year award, we're focusing on the positive. We're focusing on those strong examples of individuals who've had the opportunity to make business decisions, and they've taken the path that has led not just to financial success, but to the empowerment of others. We are familiar with, and the Fellows Program is a direct response to instances in which that hasn't necessarily been the case. So I think that there's a learning lesson in everything. Ethical leadership probably is at one time a response when things haven't gone right necessarily, but we always try and focus on empowering and celebrating those positive aspects in the Ethical Leader of the Year award.
And I think that's right for the award, because obviously the award is intended to focus on great examples, people and organizations that model the behaviors that are ethical. That being said, from the SHRM perspective, we have to celebrate, but also call out, and I'm talking on a day-to-day basis. We're obviously not going to provide a list every year to shame people about unethical behavior, but within organizations, there have to be very clear consequences to people who don't live those values and those principles. So it's not enough to just celebrate the people who do who act ethically, but you have to say to people, and in the off chance that you don't, this is what it looks like, and here are the consequences. So we don't lead with this, we don't advertise it, but I will tell you internally, it is sometimes as important for a bad player to be exited from the organization, frankly, a little publicly, so that others know we're not just talking about this. There are teeth behind this because it is that important to this organization. Again, we don't like to focus on the negative, but I think there needs to be a very clear understanding within the organization that there are negative consequences to not acting ethically.
It sounds like you're walking the talk. You have to make sure that people understand that this is real and that this is part of who we are as a company. If you want to be a part of it, embrace it.
And even then, even in those instances where a decision is made that someone's ethical sort of barometer was a little off, we still believe in treating people with dignity and respect, even on their way out. So we have a phrase here at SHRM that says red carpet in, red carpet out. Even if someone, fudged on their expense report, that's unethical behavior. It can't be tolerated, even if it's no money in the scheme of things. You're a billion-dollar organization and someone cheating on, for $200 dinner they didn't actually eat. You could say in the scheme of things, it's not a big deal, but it is a big deal. And there have to be serious consequences. That being said, we really go to great lengths as SHRM to emphasize that even that person, you must have grace. People make mistakes. We believe in second chances, and it's not just in the criminal justice context, but second chances. It's doing this right, making it clear that this behavior is not tolerated, while at the same time remembering there's a human on the other side of that, and human beings have ethical lapses over 70, 80, 100 years on Earth. All of us do.
So turning to the award this year, you jointly picked Marvin Ellison, the CEO, chairman of Lowe's. What about how he leads made you pick him this year?
When the selection committee met, we had a lot of good candidates this year. And Marvin really rose to the top for a variety of reasons. I think no one would argue with Lowe's financial success under Marvin. Their stock price went from 80 to 230, like almost tripled in value, and their market cap has similarly doubled. But it's everything else that really made Marvin a clear-cut choice. At Lowe's, Marvin has invested $50 million to prepare 50,000 individuals for skilled jobs to address the skills gap. They've invested $100 million in Lowe's Hometown Initiative, an initiative to revitalize community spaces across America, across rural America. During the pandemic, Lowe's dedicated $1.1 billion in assistance to support communities and first responders. During Marvin's leadership at Lowe's, they've gone from having one of the least to one of the most diverse executive leadership teams in the Fortune 500. I think back to something that actually Johnny said at SHRM 24 about the importance of investing in people and the resounding effect that that can have on transforming society. And I really believe that Marvin captures that perfectly, all while leading Lowe's to excellence.
And I would add, absolutely, all of those are the reasons why the jurors selected. We have a jury of peers and business people and organizational leaders who watched his body of work. The key is it wasn't just once. He has run 2 Fortune 500 companies, coming out of JCPenney, running that shop, and now this one. So he has a sustained record of engaging in ethical behavior himself, but also building cultures where people operate more ethically because of him. To me, Ramona, that's been the most, and during this process of, we looked at a lot of leaders, but you could actually be an ethical, beyond reproach. You could be the most ethical person on the planet, but are you amplifying? Are you role modeling? Are you ensuring that all of your 80 to 100,000 associates, do they understand that? And they do it and understand it because you walk the talk. And I tell you, Marvin's comments during his acceptance speech really captured why he was the right person for this award, because he has lived these guiding principles essentially for as long as we know in his professional career. And this was before he was a CEO. That was really compelling to me, is how do you take who you are and through suggestion and through role modeling, get others to be their best selves and most ethical selves?
I completely agree with that. One thing that is interesting about leadership, it's a social process. And you could really tell that Marvin was able to model phenomenal behavior that trickled down throughout the entire organization.
So at Working Nation, we have been following with great interest what Lowe's has done for its associates and for the communities where they live, because the skilled trade, career training, emphasis on higher education, it's a pathway to economic mobility. And it seems very full and intentional. So being a part of a community seems to be part of that ethical value, I think.
I would agree. When we were doing our vetting of our candidates, one thing that just emerged from Marvin's, the philanthropic decisions that Lowe's had made, such as the investment in skilled trades, but also just his conferences, is that he's a leader in rural America. There's not a lot of companies today that have decided that they're going to serve the areas between the cities. And I think Lowe's has stepped into that area quite nicely. These jobs are necessary for the advancement of our economy and the uplifting of individuals. And I think this is important to Marvin. He spoke about his upbringing in the South. And I think that this is beyond just what he wants to be as a leader, but also as a person.
We at SHRM refer to, oftentimes you hear about the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And there's a different rule that we talk about. It's the platinum rule. And that is that you treat others as they would want to be treated. To me, that is such a part of and a characteristic of leaders like Marvin Ellison. It's one of those things where you can tell in your conversations with him that, and I had a couple of them, and then backstage after the speech, that he really is trying to dig into his own empathy. And empathetic leadership is a big part of leaders who are ethical, is you try to see and experience life through the other person's lens. And when you do that, you're less likely to have ethical breaches, because you're not just thinking about its impact on you, that is engaging in unethical behavior, but you think about how the ripple effect, the wake effect of that on other people. So he really was some things you just wouldn't do if you realized how that would impact other people, not just you. I mean, we've seen countless examples over the years where CEOs have engaged in not quite illegal, but unethical behavior, and they walked away with huge packages. And so they made a ton of money and life was good. Lots of folks lost their jobs as a result of it. Pensioners lost their pensions, et cetera. So they didn't do enough to go to jail, but they did enough to ruin other people's lives. And that violates the platinum rule. It just does. And so I will say for him, every indication from all of the very extensive work that Brian and the folks at the McGowan Fund engage in with the selection process is this is the kind of guy who literally lives that platinum rule, which in this society, it's hard to do because it's much easier to look at things from your perspective. Walking in someone else's shoes or attempting to do that is really hard, but I think it makes you super good at when you're faced with ethical dilemmas if you live by the platinum rule.
One thing that I was thinking about at SHRM is Johnny was speaking about the importance of civility in HR and in business today. He had a stat that is going to escape me. Johnny, can you remind me the number of incivil acts there are in the workplace every single day?
Yeah, like over 200 million per day.
It's astounding. And I came away after talking with Marvin. Lowe's is a leader that bridges some of the gaps that we have in this country. And we need more organizations that help to bring people together in this manner. I think when it comes to the importance of civility, organizations that see and service everyone is super crucial to bridging this gap and promoting civility in the workplace.
I want to thank both of you for joining me and talking about this important subject, and congratulations to Marvin Ellison, Chairman and CEO of Lowe's, for the Ethical Leader of the Year Award. I appreciate you guys sitting down with me.
Thank you, Ramona. We always enjoy the time together. And thank you, well, Brian, for the partnership.
Johnny, it's always a pleasure. I'm looking forward to it again this upcoming year. And Ramona, thank you for inviting me to this conversation.
I've been speaking with Brian Peckrill, Executive Director of the William G. McGowan Charitable Fund, and Johnny C. Taylor, President and CEO of SHRM. I'm Ramona Schindelheim, Editor-in-Chief of Working Nation. Thank you for listening.